Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Today, we're going to be talking about finding the perpendicular bisector, also known as the right bisector. So, what even is a perpendicular bisector? A perpendicular bisector is a line that is perpendicular to a line and passes through its midpoint. So, for example, let's say we have a line like this, and this is the midpoint. The perpendicular bisector would go like this, right? Because it would have to be perpendicular, first of all, right? So it would have to have all 90-degree angles and also has to pass through the midpoint, right? And so if we're asked to find the perpendicular bisector, we need to find two things. We need to know what the midpoint is, right? Because that's a point that the perpendicular bisector passes through. And we also have to know what is the negative reciprocal slope, right? Because any line that's perpendicular to another line, we know from grade 9 that they have negative reciprocal slopes, okay? So if we find the slope of the original line and then we take we make it the slope of the perpendicular line by taking the negative reciprocal, then we have the slope. And then to get a point on this line, we can take the midpoint of the original line, right, which is also a point on the new line too, right? And then we can use those two things to find out the b value or the y-intercept. And then there we go. We found the equation for the perpendicular bisector. The other thing I can't stress enough is perpendicular bisector it is itself a line. It's not just a point, right? And so given that it's a line, we should be able to express it in y equals mx plus b format. When it says determine the equation for the perpendicular bisector, they're looking for an equation in the form of y equals mx plus b, or equation of a line. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this. So what's the first step here? Well, if we can find the slope of the original line from point A to point B, then we can also find the slope of the new line, right, by taking negative reciprocal. So let's do that first. Let's do the slope of AB. Then that's going to be delta y over delta x, right? Delta y over delta x. And that's going to be 4 minus 10 over 3 minus 6. So that's going to be negative 6 over negative 3, which is 2. Okay, so there we go. There's our slope from point A to point B. Okay, so what is our slope of the perpendicular? The slope of the perpendicular bisector would be negative a half, right? Because we make it negative and then we take the reciprocal. So we flip the fraction on its head. Or in this case, 2 is the same as 2 over 1. So 2 over 1 becomes 1 half when we take the reciprocal. So that's another way to think of it. When it's a whole number, think about whole number is just whole number over 1. We flip it, we get the reciprocal. And then for perpendicular lines, we must make it the negative reciprocal. So that's why there's also a negative sign there in front of the a half. Okay, good. So now we found the slope of our perpendicular bisector. Now we need to find the y-intercept. But to find the y-intercept, we need to know a point. And how can we know a point? Well, we know that the perpendicular bisector passes through the midpoint of A and B. So if we find the midpoint of A and B, then that's a point on this line. Midpoint of AB will be 3 plus 6 over 2, so the average of the x values, right? And then the average of the y values, and that's going to be 9 over 2, 14 over 2, which is 4.57. So there we go. So there is a point on this line. Okay, now what must we do to get the equation of the perpendicular bisector? Well, we have a point on the perpendicular bisector, which is our midpoint, and we also have the slope of the perpendicular bisector, which is negative a half. So what must we do now? We need to plug all of this in order to find b, right? B, the y-intercept, is the only thing that we don't know. Okay, so therefore 7 equals negative a half times 4.5 plus b. This is going to be negative, let's see, 4.5 over 2 is the same as 9 over 4. And let's see, 7 times 4, that's 28. 4 plus 9 over 4. So B is equal to, or not 36, sorry, 37 over 4. So therefore, the equation of the perpendicular bisector is y equals negative a half x plus 37 over 4, right? So that's the great thing about these questions too, is they're all the same, right? We always do the same steps. We find the slope, we take the negative reciprocal of that slope to find the slope of our perpendicular bisector. Then we find the midpoint of A and B of the original, and then we say, oh well, we also know that's a point on the perpendicular bisector, and we use the new slope we found and that midpoint to find the B value, and then we're done. All right, well, good work today, everyone, and I will see everyone next time. Bye, everyone.